So you guys really seem to enjoy episode 1 of the cut content series, because just looking at the analytics, you guys gave it 518 likes, which is absolutely ridiculous, at least at the time of recording this video. So thank you for the tremendous amount of support on that. I really genuinely appreciate that. I just love making videos about cut content, and the fact that you guys received it extremely well and you like learning about it too is phenomenal. If we can hit around the same like goal, we will do a part 3. I'm not expecting to hit 518, but if we can get about 300 to 400 likes, that would be very much appreciated. Without any further delay, I hope you can sit back, relax, and enjoy another 20 minutes of cut or removed content from the Bioshock series. Let's begin. So as per usual, we'll be starting off with Bioshock 1, moving our way all the way to Burial at Sea, and hopefully I can actually touch on that DLC within this video, because I believe I didn't do that within part 1, so my sincerest apologies. Now, let's start off with Julie Langford. Originally, Julie was supposed to be a male character, and his name would have been Holden, but way far in the developmental progress, that ended up being changed, and that was due to Ken Levine thinking and stating that they didn't have many female characters in the game, which is kind of true because you had only Bridget Tenenbaum, and I believe the Little Sisters, and obviously the female splicers, whether it was the Houdinis, the Spider Splicers, etc. You get the point there. So to switch it from Holden Langford to Julie, I think was a smart idea. What do you guys think? Would it have mattered if Julie ended up being Holden Langford? Please let me know down in the comment section below. I'd very much appreciate that. Coming in at our second spot for the original Bioshock is something that reminds me of Futurama. And if you understand what I mean by this, I absolutely adore you. So these would have been enemies called savants, and they were going to be genetically engineered humans or bosses in the early versions of the game. And they were going to be essentially heads in jars. That's why I said it makes me think of Futurama, because of all of the people's heads that are in jars that are functioning within the Futurama universe. So it would have been exactly like that, and I just don't think it would have had its place within Bioshock. Obviously, they would have been intelligent, they would have been smart, but as a boss or an enemy, I don't believe it would have been that believable of a fight. So I'm definitely glad we weren't fighting heads in jars. That just would have been a little weird for a Bioshock, but hey, that's just my personal opinion. Next, we have the original Grenadier Splicer, which eventually ended up turning into the Nitro Splicer. As you can see on screen, nothing wrong with it, but this would have been a rather big boy. So, this was a large gray model spliced to carry giant grenades to obviously throw at the player, just like the Nitro Splicer. So essentially, he would have been a walking grenade launcher. He would have also had a backpack and a messenger bag for the grenades and the additional smaller bags attached to his pants. He also had a strange black tool sticking out of his chest and bandages covering the majority of his arms and face. So it seems like whatever happened to this individual, they really tried patching themselves up with a lot of things like tape or bandages, etc. So big boy throwing grenades at you, that definitely would have been a lot more terrifying than a regular Nitro Splicer. Now this next one seems to rather be a favorite for the fandom, that being Mommy Dearest. So if we go back in time and look at the art book of Bioshock 1, that being called Bioshock Breaking the Mold, it reveals the illustration that you're going to be seeing on the screen right now. And obviously we did not see her in the final game. However, nothing is really known about this character. There isn't any information, there's no backstory. I think it was just an idea that the developers had. They sketched it out, or the artists, I should say, just sketched it out, kind of threw it at the wall to see if it stuck, and unfortunately, it didn't. However, I do believe that this was the earlier versions of the Lady Smith splicers, just with a little bit of a difference in appearance, dress, and just very minor things here and there. Let me know what you think of that down in the comments, would you kindly? Now, the final enemy I'd like to focus on within the Bioshock 1 aspect of this video are the early splicers and their concept arts. Some of these would have made the original Bioshock infinitely more terrifying, and you see what I did there? Nice little pun. Hey, I like my puns. But regardless, a lot of the pictures that I've seen of the concept art of these splicers are just downright terrifying, and I'll put a couple of them on the screen right now. The deeper I dive down the rabbit hole of cut and removed assets, content, concepts of the Bioshock series, the more I wish we could have actually seen some of these in action. So, as you can see, we see some that straight up look like scary monsters out of a horror movie. The Jellyman looks absolutely incredible, and some of them just look extremely badass. There's no way to sugarcoat it. So for yourself, I would highly recommend going and just checking out the early concept arts of a lot of different splicers, because when I say there are a ton of these, I legitimately mean there are a shit ton of early splicers that just didn't end up making the cut, which is ultimately unfortunate, because a lot of these, again, I believe would have made Bioshock an infinitely more scary game to play. And obviously with you and the isolation of being in Rapture, trying to survive, would have been incredible. Some of them, it makes sense why they got cut. Others I could have definitely seen making the final game. Let me know what your favorites are down in the comment section below. For me personally, I think the Jellyman might be my personal favorite just because of how badass it looks. So let me know. Overall, the last thing I'd like to discuss that was removed or just completely scrapped from Bioshock is a weapon called the Bioweapon. This was the chemical thrower before they actually made the chemical thrower. And instead of shooting out fire or electricity or, liquid nitrogen, you would have actually fired out plasmids. How badass does that sound? And the 4 plasmids that we know 100% for sure that they would have shot out include the following. My personal favorite, insect swarm. So not only having insects at the palm of your hand, you would have had them within a weapon as well. The other 3 are kind of toss-ups, and they're up in the air for your own interpretation. We would have had a berserk toxin, which I imagine could have been something like enrage. We have a disease cloud. I'm not entirely sure about that one. And then we have a generic repellent. That could have been maybe something like telekinesis or electrobolt, just your base plasmid that you get at the start of the game. Interesting though, both the bioweapon and its ammunition actually did exist in Rapture. And apparently, if you look around the Silverwing, you can actually see it, but it's not used in its original function. You can just see cans of the berserk toxin that are stacked around target practice stands around the Rapture's Grand Carnival in the challenge rooms. So that might be why we don't see it a lot. At least for me, because I know I sure as hell don't play that DLC, because Bioshock 1's DLC just wasn't it for me. So if you have a very keen eye and want to actually go explore the challenge rooms for this, by all means, go for it and see if you can actually find the cans of the berserk toxin. So that is my challenge to you. Moving on to Bioshock 2, we have a fact that I really enjoy bringing up to you guys, and we're going to be looking at the original Eleanor Lamb. Originally, besides her being a big sister at the end of the game to help Subject Delta, she was going to be a big sister during the entirety of the game. And there was going to be a plot twist, obviously, revealing that the big sister would have been the daughter of our main character, Subject Delta. And we would have had multiple battles with her as well, obviously with rescuing the little sisters or dealing with them however you wish, 3 of them to be specific. You would have fought a big sister along with Eleanor. So thankfully that side got removed. The fact I like telling you about is that it was going to be revealed that Eleanor was the biological daughter of Subject Delta. And I want to believe that this is still canon. So I'm going to. You can't stop me. But apparently it was via a sperm donation, and it was against Subject Delta's will. So yeah, I can see why that wouldn't have been a good look. Just throwing that out there now. But again, I want to think that it's canon that Eleanor Lamb is indeed the real biological daughter of Subject Delta. Do you guys consider that canon as well? Especially if it's a removed piece of content, because they do act like father and daughter, at least in terms of the protectiveness. I know, obviously, big daddies are supposed to protect their little sisters, but it felt a little more parental rather than territorial, if that makes any sense. Let me know down in the comment section below. Now, I will say I wish we saw more quote-unquote ghosts in Bioshock and Bioshock 2, and I say ghosts in quotes because obviously we get memories or flashbacks of previous Adam users by taking Adam ourselves. However, this next one would have actually taken that and shoved it into the extreme category, and that would have been a drug called Eden. So this drug, which would have been taken by Delta, would have actually brought you back to a preserved memory, that being of Ava Tate, I believe. And it would have been at a wild party within Dionysus Park before that asshole, even though I love you, Bill Lobley, Stanley Poole, flooded it. This drug would have caused extremely powerful hallucinations, and you can see on the screen there would have been puppets and marionettes, so that just would have been an acid trip in and of itself. But these would have made Delta see memories from his past, basically catching him up to speed in terms of what he missed during the time he was quote-unquote dead, and then obviously leading up to the time that he was resurrected within the Vita Chamber. This is where that aforementioned 20-foot Senator Cohen monster bunny would have applied. So in this context, I can understand that making Senator Cohen a 20-foot monster bunny would have been actually rather appropriate. I'm still glad that they didn't do it because that's my favorite character, and I just wouldn't have been able to take that seriously. What do you guys think? The final 2 things I'd like to discuss for the Bioshock 2 portion revolves around Minerva's Den, and I feel that I didn't give this DLC as well as the Burial at Sea DLC its due diligence in part 1, so I'd like to do that here. So, very quick backstory and context to the hydropower that you're going to see on screen. Obviously, we know through Bioshock 1 that there is some sort of lava or lava system that's put in place that actually helps power Rapture. We drain that, and we actually get to go to Andrew Ryan. This same concept would have likely been applied to Minerva's Den as well, although it's not explicitly stated, we can assume so. So, this concept art shows a completely different way that Minerva's Den would have actually been powered, and that would have been through hydro-powered pumps. They would have been viewable from the Thinker's Chamber, and in the end, unfortunately, there is no reference to any sort of hydroelectric plants or power plants that would have actually functioned and properly ran Minerva's den. So that's why I said we can assume it's just like Hephaestus. Now, the second thing I'd like to discuss is that they were going to have a Big Ben of Rapture. For those of you who don't know, Big Ben is a huge clock tower within the UK, for all my non-UK viewers out there. The significance of it, I'm not sure what would have been, because obviously Charles Milton Porter was not British, though he did live in London during the Blitz during World War II, so I guess that would have made sense if they wanted to actually build that and incorporate that backstory more into the main story of Bioshock Infinite. But this would have been located at the top of Minerva's den. It would have been illuminated from the inside, allowing it to be seen from all around Rapture. So I assume we could have seen it during the base game itself. And unfortunately, it was cut, but I do like the concept of trying to tie the backstory of Charles Milton Porter and even Pearl Porter with the Big Ben of Rapture, especially when you know what happens to Pearl Porter in London. So that would have been a nice touch. But again, it's one of those things that in hindsight just would not have made sense in game. So I'm actually relieved it got cut, because that would have just been a little more depressing, having to think of that constantly while traversing Minerva's den. Now let's move our way up into the clouds and to Columbia. This first one in particular is going to be a little bit of a 2-for-1 special. We have the Crow, or Charles, along with Henry Saltonstall. Saltonstall was a politician within Columbia, and we can see that through various trailers that was released during the time of Bioshock Infinite's hype. And unfortunately, he didn't make the cut in the final game, but he would have flipped from Saltonstall to someone completely different at the snap of a finger. And Charles, on the other hand, was a servant of his, and he would have been a vigor junkie as well. The only really depressing thing about these two being cut is that we see that telekinesis would have clearly been in the game for Bioshock Infinite in these trailers. I'm going to put one of them down in the description for you to check out, but I wish telekinesis would have been in Bioshock Infinite. That would have made things a lot more fun, and it would have gave us something else to mess around with as well. And especially with Jeremiah Fink and Dr. Suchong sharing ideas, I think Fink could have made his own version of telekinesis. Moving on, we had enemies called magicians. And as you can see on screen now, there would have been a female magician using her powers, and again, it looks like they would be using telekinesis. However, there would have been an idea for this sort of theatrical type of magician existing in both male and female variations. They would have been inspired by Sander Cohen, and they would have possessed telekinesis. Again, I wish it would have been in Bioshock Infinite, but every time I say it, I know it's not or ever going to happen, so I need to shut the fuck up about it, because that's annoying. If you guys want to punch me in the nose for saying that telekinesis should be in Infinite, I don't blame you. But this would have been a rather interesting enemy to actually fight, because I feel that there would have been a lot of strategy going into this. Or you could just do what I and probably many other people have done and use something like Charge along with a piece of gear that would have either electrocuted or set the magician on fire. So yeah, in theory, this would have been an interesting enemy, but in practice, I don't think it would have been very practical. Next up, we have the Merged, and thank Christ these things did not make the final cut of the game. And I'm not even going to call them people, I'm going to call them things, because they should have been aborted at the time of their own conception. Essentially, what would have happened is using tears would have caused either deterioration or actual merging, hence the name, of past or future versions of yourself with present. So you could have gone in a tear completely normal and come out through another tear with a baby version of yourself stuck to your face. That would have been absolutely gross to have to deal with. And can you imagine if that happened to either Booker or Elizabeth? Ugh, that would have been fucking nasty. Now, it's safe to say that the concept arts from a lot of the developers and the artists themselves are extremely fascinating, but it seems that Rob Waters specifically went extremely hard with a lot of these concept arts. So we would have had a little sister counterpart within Columbia. I'm not exactly sure what their use would have been, because obviously there weren't corpses all around Columbia where the little sister could have went and gathered Adam. So I'm not entirely sure what their purpose was going to be or what it would have been. I think they wanted to just figure out a way to incorporate something from Bioshock 1 and 2 and try to make an equal or a little bit of an opposite counterpart to that within Columbia. And it makes sense with the whole constants and variables type thing. And the concept art alone looks incredibly badass for the little sister counterparts. However, again, I just don't see the logic behind it. And I also don't see the plausibility and the actual overall effectiveness of having a counterpart of a little sister in Columbia. Just from a logical standpoint, like I said. There aren't corpses that are littered around Columbia where they could just walk up, stick them in the neck with a needle, and take out the atom, or in this case, the salts. So, do you think they would have worked, or do you think this would have been a failed idea if it made it in the final game? This next enemy, just from concept art alone, looks extremely, and I mean extremely badass. And I think this was the inspiration for the sirens at the end that finally made the final cut of Infinite. So a concept art that was circulating, as you can see on the screen right now, would have been of an enemy known as a Resurrector. And obviously, by the name, it would have had necromancy type abilities where they could bring people like the sirens back from the dead and use them as essentially their puppets to go and fight Booker DeWitt. So I don't know the design of it as to why they wanted to dress them like a cardinal of the Catholic Church, but then again, Columbia, extremely religious, so that would have made a little bit more sense. The other two concept arts don't really make sense, so I wanted to show you this one in particular. Again, would have been absolutely incredible. And with these, there would have been something coming out of their hands, as you can see within the actual concept art picture of itself, and they would have been considered quote-unquote bleeding hearts. And I believe this is where they would have actually summon something out of their hands to resurrect those dead enemies. Again, extremely badass enemy in thought, but how would it have worked in execution? We don't know, and we'll never know, unfortunately. Now, this next one makes a lot more sense, especially when you take into consideration the paranoia of Comstock and just the paranoia of people in Columbia overall when Booker arrives. And again, it's made by Rob Waters. This would have been an automatronic security camera. So instead of an enemy walking around with the typical body, head, etc., its head would have been an actual security camera. So instead of the voice of silence acting like sort of a watch or lookout, and alarm, this could have actually actively surveyed, I should say, Booker as you make your way throughout Columbia. So again, this one would have made a lot of sense to me, but it might be one of those things where in theory it sounds amazing, but in execution it just wouldn't work. And we can say that going all the way back to Bioshock 1 with the teleportation plasmid. It sounds like an extremely good idea, but in practice it just doesn't work, it's broken, it doesn't make sense, etc. It was cut for a reason, so we just have to take that at face value. These next enemies would have been some of my favorite enemies in the game if they actually stayed, and just the concept art alone makes me absolutely love them. And we can kind of see them in the final version of the game, more towards Burial at Sea, but we do get a partial Vigor Junkie with Cornelius Slate. You can see little bits and pieces of crystals coming out of his head from the Shock Jockey, and then eventually you can see them as Old Man Winter Splicers in Burial at Sea. So you can see them on the screen now. The more they spliced, or in this case the more of the vigors that they consumed, the more the vigor itself would have consumed them. So it was a risk and reward type situation. It would have been interesting. It would have been awesome to have an enemy like this, but alas, we don't get too many. We could have had different things like the actual crows pop up all over the place and have them actually appear crow-like. Or same thing with Devil's Kiss, there could have been flames coming out of someone, not like the fireman, but an actual person. I don't know, the possibilities could have been endless. The final two things I'd like to discuss for the base game of Bioshock Infinite are the artillery cannon and the Vox siren, both of which were seen either in the early gameplay demonstrations of Bioshock Infinite or the E3 2011 gameplay reveal. So, the artillery cannon, obviously we didn't get it in the finished game. I imagine they would have been all throughout Columbia, and they would have been used to shoot things down like motorized Patriots, turrets, Zeppelins, or just other invading forces to help protect Columbia. So, it's a shame that those didn't make the final cut. Can you imagine using possession on that to actually turn that against your enemies? That would have been wonderful. Now, the Vox siren is a rather interesting one. We see this during the E3 2011 gameplay reveal, but unfortunately, this again did not make the final cut of the game. Imagine after Booker and Elizabeth go through the terror, where they go into a world where Booker died helping the Vox Revolution. Daisy alludes to you as a ghost of Booker DeWitt or an imposter, so keep that in mind. You go a little bit during Bioshock Infinite, you progress, and you start fighting the Vox. Can you imagine fighting a huge group of Vox Populi, then all of a sudden having one of them break off and sound this siren? This would have brought reinforcements, and that could have included a wide variety of Vox members, such as the RPG users, the motorized Patriots, their own Zeppelins. The possibilities are endless, and the fact that they did not utilize that in the game really upsets me, because that could have made for a lot of interesting fights. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below of that. Finally, let's end with Burial at Sea just as a whole. It doesn't matter if it was episode 1 or episode 2. These two enemies would have been in it regardless, or theoretically should have been in it. The first would have been Grenade Launcher or RPG Splicers. And as you can see on the screen now, these would have resembled ones that you could have seen in Columbia 2. So these would have made sense in Rapture itself. These unique types of enemies would have actually had armor, and they could have made it themselves too, just from scavenging Rapture. Obviously, they didn't appear anywhere in the game, but the model's design again is used in the similar appearance of the male splicers encountered within the store, albeit more buff and obviously with grenade launchers or rocket launchers. In this case, this would have more or less resembled one of the heavy hitters of Bioshock Infinite that they brought from Columbia and made their own versions in Rapture. That would have been rather interesting, especially when you have to actually fight them. You imagine during episode 2 encountering one of them and having to creep behind them as Elizabeth and use the skyhook to knock him out. I feel that if you messed up, you would have just gotten blown away with one of the rocket launchers. So it would have been funny now that I think about it, but in practice, again, I'm not sure if it would have been good or just at least an execution. Now, the final character I would like to discuss in this video are the jockey splicers. For whatever reason, these were cut from the game. Again, not sure why. Maybe it was one of those good in theory, bad in execution types of enemies, but they very similarly resemble the Vigor Junkies. However, instead of still having somewhat humanity with the Vigor Junkies, the jockey splicers themselves would have been consumed by their own habits. So they would have looked a lot more non-human like, and they would have had a lot more protrusions of shock jockey. Now, these characters in particular are alluded to by Booker DeWitt in Burial at Sea, but again, they are completely removed from the game. It would have been interesting to come across these guys, especially when you would have to fight them alongside things like the Old Man Winter Vigor Junkie. But again, I think that this might have been a better enemy in theory, in hindsight at least, rather than a enemy in execution. Again, I know I've asked this multiple times, but let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Well everyone, that's going to conclude episode 2 of our cut and removed content series here on the channel. If you'd like to see more in the future, let's try to hit 300 or 400 likes on this video. And hell, I'll even make a deal with you. If we can surpass the likes of episode 1, which I believe is around the 518 mark, I'll give you guys something in return. I'll add more time to episode 3. So instead of getting 15 to 20 minutes of cut or removed content, I could potentially do 30 to 45 minutes. So if that sounds like a deal, then that is completely up to you guys, and just know I appreciate it thoroughly. If you enjoyed the content and want to see more, would you kindly hit that subscribe button? We are on the road to 50,000 subscribers, and the sooner we can hit that, the sooner that would make me beyond happy and grateful for what you guys have done for me. And also, if you're not subscribed, but you find yourself coming back to the channel or the videos on the regular, why not hit that subscribe button? It helps the channel out tremendously, and you're already coming back anyway, so hopefully the future content will entice you enough to hit that subscribe button. Plus, it's free and you can unsubscribe at any time you want. Also, if you enjoyed the video and want to see more, would you kindly hit that like button? Again, it greatly helps out the channel. And hit that bell and turn on all post notifications to never miss a future video or a future live stream. And also, if you want to help me outside of YouTube, consider becoming a channel member. The details are down in the description, or you can hit the join button, check it out for yourself, and see if that's something you'd like to be a part of. If you want to talk to me outside of YouTube, my social medias and our community Discord server, which I would love to have you guys in, those links will be down in the description below. A couple of videos will be popping up on the screen here shortly. If you want to go check those out, I'd highly recommend those because those are some pretty damn good videos, if I do say so myself. And with that being said, thank you all so much for watching today's video again. With that, thank you. I will talk to you all again very soon. Take care, stay safe, And as mentioned, I will talk to you all again very, very soon. Take care, guys.